do that. So National Novel Writing Month happened every November, and the goal was to write at least a 55,000 word novel within 1 month. And you just got your words every day, and there were pep talks, and it was kind of a community thing, and people would do get-togethers so that you would do word sprints. We're all on board. Let's try and get a book written. I think the spirit of it was really cool. Um, and I tried any number of times. I must have tried 5 or 6 times and failed every time. So Legends and Lattes, the first book that I successfully wrote, was written as part of National Novel Writing Month in 2021, I think. And having that structure was great. And also I had a writing buddy who really made sure that I pulled through. She's a friend of mine, Avon Shore Kind. She's also a fellow narrator. She also had attempted National Novel Writing Month before and was convinced that I should write stuff. So she said, you got to do it again. And I said, I will if you will. And she said, okay. And we both finished. And I think one of the keys to that was we both picked concepts that were on the surface silly. Like our personal investment in them was at the outset low. Didn't end up that way, but it didn't feel like if we struck out, it would be that big of a deal, because it kind of hurts when you try and do something and you swing big and then you fail. And both of us had done that a lot. You have this sense that, like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to write a book, it's got to be the best thing ever because this is the only time I'm going to do it. And so if it falls short of that, you lose your momentum and you're like, no, I'm not really living up to what I intended to do. This is not worth my time. And it's easy to talk yourself out of it. So we both did something ridiculous. I did an orc opening a coffee shop, and she did a hockey romance. So Legends and Lattes is basically a story about an orc mercenary in her 40s who's been doing the same job for a long time, decides she doesn't want to do it anymore, and retires to another city to open a coffee shop in a city that's never heard of coffee before. Basically, it's a found family sort of cozy fantasy where she discovers this new community that she didn't know was there. And this ends up, I discovered about halfway through the book that this is basically just me. I was a video game for decades into my 40s. I got tired of it and I quit and I moved to another city and I started as a full-time audiobook narrator, and I discovered like this book community that was really essential to me. Very diverse, really welcoming, really cool people. I didn't know I was doing that at the time. So it became, I said, well, I chose a ridiculous concept, but it ended up becoming really personal in an accidental way. So the way that the world works, it's people call this genre cozy fantasy. It's not something I was really aware of at the time. In retrospect, there's lots of cozy fantasy. And The Hobbit is cozy fantasy. Let's face it. Terry Pratchett, I think, qualifies as cozy fantasy. But I just wanted to. It started as a joke. I wanted to. I narrate live in a Discord channel a lot of the time, and I read all this high intensity stuff. The middle of COVID, that's not really what I wanted to be reading, but it dominated my reading because I was being paid to read it. And I was joking around that what I really wanted was just a Hallmark movie set in the Forgotten Realms. Because I was watching a lot of the Great British Bake Off. I was watching like Fixer Upper. These are the kinds of, this is the level of drama and satisfaction that I wanted out of what I was watching at the time. I wanted to feel okay. So the fantasy world here is, I think the thing that sets like cozy fantasy apart from like more traditional fantasy is that it's using the trappings of fantasy to talk about everyday things, just things that we actually deal with as modern people. When you think of epic fantasy, you think of stuff that you're never going to do. You're going to, overthrow an evil overlord, or you're going to fight a dragon, or whatever. It's epic. And while the characters may deal with relatable things, it's set within the context of this bigger story. And cozy fantasy, I think, is focused on things that you and I all experience. Starting a small business in your 40s, figuring out if you can switch careers late in your life, trying to make friends as a middle-aged person, which is incredibly difficult. That's the real escapist fantasy of Legends and Lattes, finding friends in your 40s. But using fantasy and using like the fairy dust of fantasy kind of reminds us that those things are important. just because they're mundane doesn't mean they aren't valid and they aren't worthy of talking about because we actually all experience them. So I think that's the that's kind of like the overarching thing that the book is set within is this focus on everyday stuff. Um, as a result, the fantasy world is pretty accessible. I think that if you haven't read a fantasy novel, you can pick it up because it trades on a lot of tropes that people have become familiar with over time. Most people know what an orc is. Most people know what an elf is, or a dwarf or whatever. We've seen Game of Thrones. People have watched Lord of the Rings. People play World of Warcraft. This is like common stuff now. And while I do have a lot of things that are unique to my world, I have a rule that I can't talk about them unless one of the characters is interested in them. So there's a real limit on like info dumping, and I mean you don't have to know 500 years of orcish history to appreciate what's going on. So it's very accessible fantasy. Um, I think of fantasy as being either like tourism fantasy. It's like Dune. I'm going to some new place and I don't know what anything is, and I'm just delighted to find out all the details of this new world. Or it's fantasy where you don't have to work too hard to get there. It comes to you. And that's where Legends on Lattes sits. So I think the challenge is the same one every time I write a new book, which is that the thing that makes a book work for me so far that I have found is what I call like the emotional engine. I have to look back over my life and say, here is a decision point I had, and I chose this way or this way. And it's something that I agonized over, obsessed over, and kept me up at night, which means I thought a lot about the way I ultimately chose, and I know how that panned out. And I also thought a lot about the road not traveled and how that might have panned out. And if I can take that moment or feeling or concept and I can transplant it into a character, then I have something that makes the story go, something that I understand and that also critically somebody else hopefully has experienced so that they'll be able to connect and relate to that. Because that's the coolest part of this is that you put something like that in a book and somebody says, oh my God, I understand this. It's really, really powerful and neat effect that I didn't know was going to happen, but now feels kind of essential to doing this. So the challenge for me is finding one and being able to articulate it to myself. Because a lot of these things we feel them, but they're like a little muddy. We know something happened, but we haven't thought about them in a way that where you like have pulled them out of yourself and you're looking at them from all angles, extract them. So finding the thing to extract and look at is really a challenge for me because I don't want to do the same thing again. I don't want to write. I have thoughts on what works for me to build a world. And one thing is what I call like the sheet over the furniture method. I know a lot of people who write and they like to write everything they can think of about their world down first. They've got like a notebook full of backstory and history and all the details of their magic system and all this stuff. I don't work that way because I find if I've done that, then I've lost all interest. I've already explored all that stuff and I don't care anymore. Or I discover later that I've walled myself in, but I feel like I have to abide by those rules that I already laid down. I can't bring myself to break them. So for me, I treat it like furniture with a sheet over it. Maybe that's probably a sofa, and maybe that's a chair over there. Maybe that's an ottoman. I know the landscape. I know the big like what matters. I know like the scale of things and vaguely how the politics work, and I have a pretty good idea, sort of the magic system. But until the time comes in the story where I have to have it in detail, I don't twitch back the sheet. And as soon as I have to know, I peel it back. And that helps me not back myself into a corner. I know there's a sofa over there. I just don't know if it's leather or vinyl or fabric. And when the time comes, I can make that decision without having to rip up the rest of my story because I've written it within mind that there is a sofa there. But now we can talk about the details of the sofa safely when I get to that point in time. And I think that helps me a lot. One, I don't spend a lot of time doodling around with lore and backstory. And two, it makes it honestly, it gives you a lot of flexibility. I can solve a problem at the moment because I still have latitude to solve it.
What is the bounty? What does the bounty that there's a certain the representation of this, bringing this goblin in. What is
Mhm.
the reward gonna? This is unique how you did this. Is it giving anything away to ask that? Or?
Well, the why of the bounty gives some stuff away. The why of the bounty gives some stuff away because it's done for a very deliberate reason that you don't find out until the end. So I don't want to say the why. Part of so the 1,000-year-old elvish mercenary that Fern finds herself in company of, her name is Asterix One Ear, and she's on like a different but parallel journey to Fern. Instead of doing something, finding out that it doesn't work for you, and then casting about for what to do, she just lives on inertia. She just keeps doing the same thing and has been doing it for 1,000 years. She's never considered turning aside or doing anything else, whether it works for her or not. Um, so for her, the bounty is just another step in the road. It's just a thing that you do. It's business as usual. Uh, and it ends up confounding her a little bit at the end, once you read to the end. I want them to have lives beyond that allow me to bring them back. So I'm delighted to bring people back because ideally I know enough about them. They've got enough raw material to support them in something else. Maybe they'll be the main character. I never expected that Fern, as a side character in Bookshops and Bone Dust, would be the main here. She was just the person that was the appropriate one to live this particular emotional engine. And so I love bringing characters back. I also I love resurrecting characters from failed books. Um, I got I don't remember where I read this advice, but it was like if you have a good idea, basically just use it. Stop stockpiling them. You're gonna get more good ideas. Don't hold them in reserve. And I was always one of those people when I played a game where I would keep all my potions till the end of the game. I'd save scum, like, oh, I don't want to use that potion. I've got 10,000 of them at the end of the game. I should have been using them every 20 minutes. The game would have gone a lot faster. It probably would have been more fun, but I had to conserve them. Um, and so I try not to do that when I'm writing. If it's there to be used, just use it. Something else cool will come along. Don't worry about it. It's an expendable resource. So I will use anything and everything that seems like it would fit.
That's definitely good advice. What is in that spirit coming up before we wrap up in the future for you in the next? If you're working on something, are you done with something? New series entirely?
I'm working on a new book entirely out of this series. It's called, well, the working title is Four Bastards and a Baby. And it is already much longer than any of these books and maybe two-thirds done. But it is in a genre that I narrate a lot, basically game lit RPG. And after reading hundreds of these aloud, I've developed opinions. So this is the way that I would write one. Um, and we will see how that goes. But it is definitely not cozy fantasy. And it is got multiple POVs. It's considerably more plot driven, honestly, than the cozy fantasy stuff that I write. And it's a whole different set of challenges. Hopefully, hopefully it will land for people because I'm not positive that what I want out of lit RPGs is what anybody else wants out of lit RPGs. We shall see.